Welcome back to another explainer. Today we're diving into the parts of ancient history that literally never make it into standard textbooks. We're talking about 7 highly documented, rigorously studied archaeological discoveries that raise way more questions than they answer. These are the kinds of sites that completely shatter our conventional timeline of human development.
You know the drill. The standard textbook picture paints this neat, superlinear progression of human history. The model tells us we went from simple nomadic survival, eventually figured out farming, and then, very slowly, built up the complex social structures and writing systems of civilization. But, well, the dirt beneath our feet reveals a much messier, frankly impossible reality. We're finding anomalies of extreme sophistication popping up thousands of years before they supposedly should even exist.
So let's jump right into Section 1, the hunter-gatherer paradox, surviving versus thriving.
Picture this. It's 34,000 years ago in Western Russia, at a site called Stonehenge. In 1955, archaeologists hit upon a staggering burial out on the frozen plains containing a young boy and a girl. But what absolutely stopped researchers in their tracks were the grave goods. They found around 10,000 hand-carved mammoth ivory beads sewn into the children's clothing. To produce those, we're talking an estimated 10,000 hours of highly skilled labor. That is the equivalent of 5 full years of non-stop work, literally the time it takes to get a modern PhD. And this was invested by a nomadic community that was supposedly focused entirely on just staying alive. Now here is where it gets really wild. Both of the skeletons in this burial showed severe abnormalities. The boy actually had a curved femur that made walking almost impossible. In a purely survival-focused society, they would have been entirely dependent on others, right? Unable to hunt, unable to gather. Yet, they were given the most elaborate burial ever found from this era. And a 2017 DNA study dropped another massive shocker. They weren't even related. This heavily implies some kind of complex, ritual-based hierarchy that textbooks simply do not associate with nomads from 34,000 years ago.
Okay, fast forward to 1700 BC, jumping over to North America in Louisiana. Here we find our next massive anomaly, Poverty Point. This is a monumental 900-acre earthwork complex. We're talking 6 concentric ridges and a colossal bird-shaped mound standing over 22 meters tall. But here's the massive catch. It was built entirely by mobile hunter-gatherers. There is zero evidence of agriculture here. No crops, no grain storage, absolutely nothing.
The established rule in archaeology is that you absolutely need farming to create food surpluses, which then frees up people to coordinate massive building projects. Well, Poverty Point completely breaks that rule. They moved 238,000 cubic meters of soil by hand. To put that into perspective, that's like a 17-ton dump truck dumping soil every single day for 5 years straight. But get this, research actually suggests the largest mound wasn't built slowly over generations. It might have been constructed in a single coordinated burst of labor lasting as little as 90 days. How dispersed nomadic hunter-gatherers fed and organized that much labor so incredibly fast remains a total mystery.
Moving on to Section 2, Ancient Astronomy and Art. Complex minds long before cities.
Let's transition from monumental earthworks to early humans tracking the stars. Back in 1991, an aerial survey during a drought in Germany uncovered a 7,000-year-old timber structure hiding right beneath a field. This is the Göbekli Circle, built around 4900 BC. That makes it over 2,000 years older than Stonehenge and older than the pyramids of Giza. It was built by simple, early Neolithic farmers. Yet, the gates of this circular enclosure perfectly align with the sunrise and sunset on the winter solstice. It's literally a precision solar and lunar observatory.
You just don't build a precise observatory like that by accident. It requires tracking the sky for generations and somehow translating all that data into architecture. So how did these early farmers develop and pass down this complex astronomical knowledge without any written language? Even more baffling, over 200 similar circular enclosures have been found across Central Europe, and most of them are sitting there entirely unexcavated, hiding what looks like a massive tradition of prehistoric astronomy.
And we see a similar mystery of deep time over at India's Bhimbetka rock shelters, which were discovered in 1957. What makes Bhimbetka so staggering is that its cave paintings represent an estimated 30,000 years of continuous human artistic activity. 30,000 years. Just let that sink in for a second.
The site reveals a breathtaking continuity. It covers 700 rock shelters across a massive forested plateau, vastly outscaling famous European sites like Lascaux. For literally hundreds of centuries, successive generations kept returning to paint on the exact same walls. Sometimes they painted directly over the ancient art, sometimes respectfully right beside it. But despite its massive scale and UNESCO status, this immense site remains heavily understudied and unmapped, largely because of a historically Eurocentric focus in archaeology.
All right, Section 3. The earliest unsolved scripts. Messages lost to time.
So if these ancient peoples had such vast knowledge and cultural organization, how did they record it all? In 1961, archaeologists in Tartaria, Romania, found 3 small clay tablets covered in incised symbols. They were in a ritual pit alongside the burned bones of an older woman, widely believed to be a priestess or some sort of ritual specialist. Now, radiocarbon dating of the organic material in the pit suggests a date of 5500 BC. If that date actually applies to the tablets, they predate the earliest Sumerian writing by over a millennium. That completely upends the idea that writing began in Mesopotamia. Unfortunately, early conservators actually baked the tablets to preserve them, which completely destroyed our ability to date the clay directly. A huge loss.
But those Tartaria tablets don't exist in a vacuum. They actually belong to the wider Vinci symbol tradition. We found hundreds of objects with similar marks stretching across multiple countries in southeastern Europe, used consistently for over 1,500 years. Experts fiercely debate what they actually are. Are they the world's first true writing system? A complex set of religious marks? Or maybe an advanced proto-writing that just faded away? The frustrating part is we still can't read a single word of it.
Similarly baffling, and also found in a context that points to ritual use, is the Phaistos disc. Discovered back in 1908 in a palace basement in Crete, this 1700 BC fired clay disc features 242 symbols arranged in a spiral pattern. Now, the Minoan civilization that made it already had 2 distinct writing systems, Linear A and Linear B. But the crazy part? The symbols on this disc match neither of them.
And here's the absolute kicker. What makes this disc truly impossible is how it was made. The symbols weren't carved by hand. They were pressed into the clay using pre-made, reusable stamps. Guys, this is essentially movable type printing used roughly 3,000 years before Gutenberg supposedly invented the printing press. But since it's sitting completely alone in the archaeological record, with no other object like it ever found, it cannot be decoded. It remains an absolute, total enigma.
Section 4. Messages in the Stone, the Tannum Rock Carvings.
Our final anomaly takes us out of dusty museum basements and into the open air of Sweden. Stretching across miles of exposed granite coastline, over 3,000 individual carvings were laboriously pecked into the rock between 1700 and 500 BC. And what's carved there totally rewrites our view of ancient Scandinavia. We see hundreds of highly advanced ships with defined hulls and crew positions that suggest open sea sailing, which vastly exceeds the basic coastal navigation assumed for the era. We see musical instruments called lures. We see dynamic warrior scenes that recent research suggests might actually depict female or gender-ambiguous figures. It paints a picture of a deeply connected, prosperous society plugged into massive trade networks reaching all the way to the Mediterranean. Bringing us to our final section, Rewriting Human History, the Pattern of the Impossible. When we piece all these impossible puzzles together, we start to realize that these aren't just isolated flukes, from 34,000-year-old high-status hunter-gatherer burials in Russia, to 90-day massive earthworks in Louisiana, to precise astronomy in Germany, and literally movable type printing in Crete. Together, they form a crystal-clear, undeniable pattern of extreme sophistication, and it's a pattern that absolutely demands a brand new model of human prehistory. The textbook timeline is just too simple. The past is vast, it's complex, and it is full of brilliant minds that functioned entirely outside our standard models of civilization. We obviously don't have all the answers yet, but honestly, that mystery is exactly what drives discovery forward. It leaves us to wonder, if early humans were capable of all this so incredibly long ago, what else is waiting out there in the dirt, completely ready to rewrite the story of us? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.